Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Friday, March 26th, covering what is a loaded Saturday of races. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatow, back with you from the woods of Maine. Dressed for the part today. Gives me an idea for a sponsor down in Freeport that I might need to hit up. I'm sure you outdoors people, cognoscenti, know exactly what I'm talking about. But what we're going to be talking about over the course of the next hour plus, are all kinds of races on this Saturday. We're going to kick off in a minute here. A little bit later on, we're going to get to talking about the loaded Gulfstream Park card. Acacia Courtney going to be joining us for that. Naomi Tucker will be here live from Dubai. We're going to wrap things up with special guest Candice Hare to talk about the JRA races. So we basically got you covered from, about 8 in the morning on Saturday till 4 in the morning on Sunday. Going to be an awful lot of fun. And we kick things off with the usual co-host of this program, coming to us from the planet Texas. He is the People's Champion, Jonathan Kitchen. JK, what's up?
Oh man, just hanging out, getting ready for a fun weekend of racing. Obviously, this is that time of year that I think a lot of horse players fell in love with. At least it's where my love started, was getting ready for the spring. We're getting ready for the Derby and the Oaks, and it's kind of like the start of the season. No offense to January and February, but this is when it really starts kind of ramping up. We know Keeneland's around the corner. We know Belmont's around the corner. We know the last round of Derby preps are around the corner, and it always gets me going.
I agree. And I do think back to my early days of fandom, and particularly getting into this time of year, because of course, for many of us, the Triple Crown is that lure that brings us into the sport. And then of course you discover everything else wonderful, the Breeders' Cup and Saratoga and this and that. But before I knew anything about horse racing, I did know there was a race called the Kentucky Derby. We'll be getting into that later. Those interested in JK's thoughts on the key Derby preps this weekend, we recommend that you check out Let Loose. We've got a whole show about it. The audio's up now. Video dropping any minute from our friends over at twinspires.com. JK, you're not here to talk about that stuff. You're here to talk about the West Coast action that we've been going over all year, really, on these shows, including the Golden Hour Pick 4. I bet that you and I both believe in. It's got those higher minimums, which reduce the amount that computer players are able to just extract from the pools. It's got this low takeout, starts with the second to last race at Santa Anita. But we're going to go back a little bit further than that. We're going to go back to race number 5, which kicks off the late pick 5. 6:20 Eastern is the post time for this 6.5 furlong turf event. 4 and up optional claimers in this spot. And JK, why don't we start with you? Who do you like in here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a very clever opinion here. I think the 4 Exaltation is very interesting. The horse is tactical, he's fast. The 6.5, it just feels like that's where you want to be. Forwardly placed in the clear. It's kind of hard to come from way out of it. You don't want to be too far out there on the front end, too far on the inside. It's a tough little configuration. And so I liked where Exaltation was drawn. Since moving to the turf, has been running well, got 2 seconds in a row. Since coming in off the layoff. And it's the horse that I liked the most on top. I thought the 2 was also interesting. Hartel, it's Peter Miller. It's a turf sprint. It's a fast speed figure. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? That Alabama's going to win the national championship in football next year? Obviously. And then I also thought the 7 towards the outside was a little bit interesting at a price. Has a lot to find on speed figures, but should be closing into it. Could improve second off of a break, but as a horse that I think more is of a B type. I think the other 2 are A types. And it's funny, when I looked at this race, Pete, it actually reminded me of the time that we got to go up to the starting gate and stand in the starting gate when they popped to go down the hill. One of the greatest moments of my life. I have no idea where the hell that cell phone is that has that video on it.
Oh, yeah, we did do a video. The photo popped up the other day as a Facebook memory, and I was shocked, JK. That was 5 years ago, if you can believe it. That great day on the hill. Rumors swirling, nothing confirmed, that the downhill turf course could be making its triumphant return a little bit later in the year. I'm sure that got your blood pumping. As for the race, I'm putting you down with the 4 as your top pick, the 4 and 2 as A's, and the 7 as a B. Does that sound about right?
That'll do it.
And we'll go real quick here because I have the same 2 as A's. That looks a decent piece of form, that common race that they come out of. Bench Judge came back to win out of that. So there you go. Preference for the 4, technically for me, been much better in the 2 runs since being gelded, but obviously Hartel, the wire threat as well. And I like your idea of the clever backup if people can afford it on their tickets. Let's move on to leg B of this Santa Anita Late Pick 5. 6:55 Eastern is the post time for race number 6. We're on the dirt going 6, 4 and up. Claimers 20 down to 18. Number 2, Captain Scotty, only 2 races removed from setting the pace at the grade 3 level. Looks the clear best speed, got to be on my tickets. And I'll also mention number 8, Octopus. Doug O'Neill claim back. Great trip stalking and pouncing. This horse has won that way before, exiting a race with really good form. I saw it as simple as 2-8. Tell me if I got that right, JK.
I see it as simple as 2, period, enter 8. Right. I feel like those are the 2 horses, but I want to differentiate the 2 from the 8. I don't want to use them equally for a couple of reasons. Like you mentioned, Captain Scotty is fast and he's classy. Octopus is fast, but not as classy. If you look at Octopus's past performances, you'll notice that he won for 25, but he was odds on that day, meaning there was nothing else in there. He won for 25. Then they ran him again for 25. He gets beat. Then he has to go all the way to 16 to get the job done. And the figure wasn't that fast. I remember we liked him that day. I don't remember if I singled him, but I liked him that day. I thought he was going to be hard to beat. And now he's facing a horse who's got a lot more class, a lot more early speed. I don't see Octopus beating Captain Scotty. I want Captain Scotty only. The only way Octopus beats him is if Captain Scotty doesn't break or if decides to scratch on the morning of the race.
Well, there you go. I think obviously very similar, and I think that is a good point that in my reckoning, too, I'd want to press up the 2 over the 8. Let's go on to race number 7, 7:25 Eastern. 1.25 miles on the turf this time. 4 and up optional claimers, 62 non-winners of 2. Condition applies as well. JK, we throw it back to you. Who do you like in here?
Well, for you down the hill lovers, you can get a little cheap thrill for the first couple of seconds of this race. They start right there kind of on the bend. So if you turn on the TV too late, you might get too excited. It's not a turf sprint. They just start on the hill. I thought the 2 horses that made the most sense to me were Mind the Gap and Greg Dar, but I also wanted to use award winner just based on the pedigree. We'll start at Mind the Gap. This horse ran well last time, closing into a slow pace. The problem is that the figure didn't come back that fast, but a lot of times in turf races, the final figure is not that fast when they're closing into a slow pace. Horses can only run so fast. So if they walk 50 seconds to the half, they can only come home so fast. They don't get wings and just fly home, although Trevor Denman would probably try to convince you otherwise. So I'm going to ignore the figure and I'm going to pay more attention to the fact that this horse ran internal fractions that put him in the mix. Greg Dar, another one. He kind of got a nice little trip last time. They kind of ran in front of him going the 9 furlongs. He comes in off of a layoff. He has won fresh before, so he makes sense. And then the 3 award winner. This is more of a pedigree play for me. This horse obviously has some pedigree that you might recognize, a half to of all those horses that sound like they have won a trophy in Hollywood at some point. Oscar performance, Oscar nominated, Emmy performance, performing arts. A lot of horses that have excelled in long distance turf races. So it's somewhere in award winner, I think, to handle this 10 furlongs. So I'm going to use those 3 as A horses. I've been pretty singly early in the card. And so I wanted to take a little bit of a chance here.
Help me out and run down them as numbers, not names.
Let's go. You need order 2, 4, 3.
2, 4, 3. And then who did you like as your B?
I'm going to use just 3 A's, no B's.
3 A's, no B's.
I do think it's interesting. I'll mention I didn't like Big Buzz last time. He ran on March 13th. He's back pretty quick. I'm not crazy about him then. I'm not crazy about him now, but I could get into the idea of him coming back quick. I think that's always a sign of confidence.
It can be something that will help horses along in their form. Obviously, looking at trainer patterns can help with that. So you want to list Big Buzz as a B as well?
No, but I just wanted to say it in case someone else was hoping that I would say it and they wanted that little push. Sure, yeah, I could see the argument. I'm gonna focus in on those other 3.
Makes sense. I had award winner on top here. You mentioned the pedigree angle. Horse comes out pretty well on just raw numbers too, and I felt like had a chance to potentially control things along the way. I also wanted to use one you didn't mention. I'll be curious to get your take on number 1, Salvador Mundi. I like the drop to allowance company. I feel like that could be the trick. And these connections are just on fire, especially when teaming up of late. So 3-1 for me in race number 7. I definitely respect the 2 and the 4 and want to have them involved as Bs. Quick thought on Salvador Mundi before we move on.
Yeah, the 2 10-furlong races weren't good. 4th, 6th. The figures weren't particularly fast. Horses 1 for 6 off a layoff. So there's like enough reasons that when it's D'Amato and Pratt, there's enough reasons to try to fade a horse like this because there's obviously going to take some money. I'm not going to be shocked and turn off my TV if the horse wins, but I'm going to try to beat the horse in this spot.
Turn off your TV. I thought you were more of a karate kick the TV guy when things go wrong. No,
I mean, I've had flashes of throwing things at a TV, and thank goodness I've just never done it because I don't think it would feel much better an hour later. I think you probably feel worse.
Oh no, I've never broken a TV. I've broken furniture. I did once drop kick one of those, one of those tables. This is it. We'll bring up a real Gen X reference for you, JK. Those little tables we used to have, those tray tables to eat dinner while watching TV. Do you even know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I once drop kicked one of them, and then of course there's that hole in the wall to commemorate the Oscars from a few years ago. But I've stayed away from the TVs though. I don't know if you've ever the Chris Andrews book. Then One Day, it's called. Amazing sports gambling stories. And possibly my favorite one, I wish I could remember which casino it was. Back in the day, there was a legendary Vegas figure called Crying Kenny. Okay. We all know the crying type of bettor. About 6 guys come to mind when I say that to you out loud. So crying, and I wish I remembered all the particulars, but so there was some game, it was like a sure under, and ridiculously, this under was in the bank, and the NBA playoff game ended up going into triple overtime. And finally, in the 3rd overtime, the game went over, and Crying Kenny was so upset that he literally shot out the TV in Vegas and said something to the effect of, "Well, that TV's never going over again."
Back in the day when you could take a gun into a casino in Vegas.
That book is fantastic, by the way. Chris was on with us a while ago. That show's worth digging out. If I think of it later, maybe I'll send that around. And apparently he's working on a sequel, which I can't wait to read. Great guy, great storyteller, and he knows where all the bodies are buried. And I think I might mean that literally. Let's move on to race number 8, JK. 7:55 is the scheduled post time for the 6-furlong dirt affair. Optional claimers at the $50,000 level. Not terribly creative in here, I'll admit, but number 7, Defense Wins, I thought just looked super strong on numbers and was going to get the best setup. I didn't think I needed to be too clever, but I did also want to at least mention the number 1, I Got No Money, presumably getting back on the right surface. And if you key off that debut and bake in some improvement, I felt like there was a case to be made. I liked 7 and 1. Curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, as far as a 7, I think Peter Earthen is more of a developing from a young standpoint. I've seen with 2-year-olds that end up being good 3-year-olds, so on and so forth. He doesn't strike me as the claiming type. And if you look at his numbers, he's 12% in his career. First time a horse is making a start with him after switching. That's not high for a guy who wins at a higher clip than that. Yes, the horse needs to be used. I had the horse more as a B off the claim. The 1, I Got No Money. You're not going to get any arguments out of me from that January performance, getting back on the dirt. I'm good with that. Don't love the rail draw, but it's a horse that I think you have to use as an A horse. And then the 4, Notre Dame, I have a feeling he won't let you down like the football team often does. They don't let me down because I know they're not going to win, but I think they probably let other people down. But this horse is fast. The speed figure last time was quick. It was earned against maiden 20s. Obviously, a little bit of a concern there. But I think that this horse is the one that you want in this spot. I'll be using all 3 of them, but I'm going to use the 7 as a B, the 1 and 4 as A's, the 4 being the top pick.
I like it. Let's move on to race number 9. It's the featured event out at Santa Anita, 8:25 Eastern for the Grade 3 Santa Ana Stakes. 1.25 miles down the turf once again. Fillies and mares with 100,000 in the pot. And when it comes to the Santa Anita Late Pick 5, JK, how are we going to get paid?
Well, look, I don't know why they did it. And I know it happens occasionally with really big races, but not always. But I just want to say that as a horse player, I love a sequence ending in a stake. I think so often, and I play a lot in New York, and we always end in these like maiden 40s, and even other places do that too. Not just New York. It happens at Gulfstream. It happens at Santa. It happens at Keeneland. It just feels like we're always ending with like Oaklawn, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, and it probably doesn't even matter. I just like ending in the stake. So I don't know why you did it, Nate and team at Santa Anita, but thank you. This is a race where Mucho Unusual is a horse that I've had mixed issues with because she's always bet. I've tried to beat her. I've tried to single her, and I've been successful at both. I've beat her a few times. I've singled her a few times, but then I've also been unsuccessful in both arenas with her. Here's what I'll say is the last time she went 1.25 miles, she got loose out on the front end. They didn't go particularly fast, and she kind of held everyone at bay. It was dangerous looking if you had kind of leaned on her, but she did it. And I think she's dangerous on the front end. I like that she's drawn the rail. I don't see why Flavian would take her back and rate her, put her in behind horses. I think we're a similar game plan, but now he knows what he has. And I think maybe he could be a little bit more aggressive and not make it so close at the end. I want to single A Mucho Unusual. I'll use the 3 going to Vegas and the 5 Red Lark as B horses. I loved Red Lark's race in the QE2 back at Keeneland. I think that's a nice little piece of form there. Look at that. I've been hanging out with you too much talking about pieces of form. I thought I just like pieces of cookies and bread and stuff, but I guess it's form as well. So I'll use Red Lark as a B type, but I'm going to single Mucho Unusual because I think she's going to be ridden aggressively. If she's not ridden aggressively, I'm sorry. You should have used the other ones, but if she's ridden aggressively, I think she'll be hard to beat.
I think they've got to ride her aggressively. She's got the speed to sit handy and finish, or maybe even be more forward than that. But I'd hate to see her too far back looking at the pace figures that these throw down. And I think it's just one of those subtle class angles when you have a horse capable of producing form at the grade 1 level, at the grade 3 level. People talk all the time about maiden special weight versus maiden claimer, and that's obviously a thing. But I think sometimes when you can find a horse capable of competing at the grade 1 level against a true grade 3 field, it's a subtle class angle that can pay dividends. I'm with you, Mucho Unusual as my lone A in this spot. I wanted to mention one, though. If Mucho Unusual does get the ride that we don't want, okay, what about number 4, Tapwater, as a potential wire threat? Maybe a horse that could improve second time off the layoff, horse that's not that far back on figs and can maybe be a decent price. I just want to throw Tapwater into the mix for the potential Bs here as well. But I think it's very likely this will come down to Mucho Unusual for us in this nightcap.
I love L&J Foxwoods. I love their silks. I love their ownership group. I love everything about them. This is a top 10 all-time named horse, Tapwater. Tap it out of a Fiji Moon mare. Very, very good name. It's just a big step up for her. She's been running against allowance. She's actually been getting beat by allowance horses. She finally got that job done, but now she's stepping back up into the stakes ranks. She's gonna have to prove it to me that she fits with these, because she seemed to kind of be a little bit underneath the bar for what you'd expect for this level of race.
In terms of price, but yeah, certainly if this becomes a darling and she gets bet way down or something, I think your cynical view might pay more dividends. You mentioned before we go up to Golden Gate that idea of the pick 6 paying off in the stake. I love it too, and it might just be nostalgia as much as anything else, but I just love the way that it used to be when the pick 6 at Naira was races 3 through 8, and then there'd be an unconnected walkout race, essentially nightcap. And I don't know. I mean, maybe just because that's how it was when I got in the game. I absolutely love it. But I do think there's something nice when your score comes down to your opinion on the biggest race of the day, too. I do think there's something to it, maybe a little bit more than just my longing for the way things once were.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about saying I'm alive to Rachel Alexandra rather than saying I'm alive to the 7 first off the claim for whoever. I was going to say someone's name, and I'm glad I probably would. Yeah, definitely. There's a different ring to it, There's a different ring to it.
You got to be careful, JK. It's a slippery slope. You start making sly comments about trainers on the show 1 minute, the next day you're cursing off jockeys on Twitter. We don't want to see you follow that trajectory.
Hey, anybody can get it.
Let's talk about these Golden Gate races. The second race of the Golden Hour, pick 4, race number 8 at Golden Gate. We're on the all-weather going 5.5, 4 and up, fillies and mares, 32 claimers down to 30. I like number 6, Miss Chief, in this spot. I just thought was going to get a great trip from Honor Near, has that figure edge, and I love the fact that going back, she ran well on the synthetic at Dundalk back in the day. I thought you could get skinny here. Hey, if it doesn't work out, you come back in the Golden Hour double. But for me, the 6, Miss Chief, was the one I wanted in this 8th race at Golden Gate. Do you have anything more clever?
Yeah, I mean, I needed Mischief. I also needed the 2 Sing in the Wind. This horse just has some nice figures. But with talking back about Mischief, the thing I liked about her is looking at Timeform US, the pace doesn't seem particularly fast, but she also doesn't have to be on the lead. She could be right in that perfect position that you see at Golden Gate. That's 2 or 3 wide, sitting off the speed, shouldn't have anything in her way at that point. And like you mentioned, she's got the back numbers to suggest she should be tough. I don't have an exact translation when it comes to turf and synthetic numbers, but if you run well on the synthetic, on the turf, I can apply that number. I can say, well, if you were running an 80 or a 70 or a 90 or whatever, I'm going to assume that you're going to do the same on the synthetic surface. So those are the 2 that I needed with my lean going to your lean, the 6 Mischief.
Last race you and I are going to talk about on this portion of the show is the 9th at Golden Gate, 8:40 Eastern, all-weather once again, 1 mile, 4 and up, $8,000 claimers down to 7 non-winners of 2 lifetime. There were 3 that I wanted. You could probably talk me into using more. I was going to put number 2, Stone Grove, on top. Just basically a very similar trip case to what you were saying about the journey you thought Miss Chief might get in the previous race. This horse has good figures, should get a great trip either on or that just outside and near the lead. I wanted to use number 3, Irish Declaration, not far off on figures, and I thought looked like the best closer of the main contenders. Should they go too fast? Should it be a day where that's the way that you want to win at Golden Gate? And then I also wanted to use, for a penny at least, number 1, Anita New Mercedes, who I thought could be loose. Looked a flow upgrade coming out of the last race on figures. And I like the other 2 better. I think it's more likely to set up for the 2 or the 3, but I do see some scenarios where the 1 just gets loose and buries him. I want that one as well. So sort of a mixed up countdown here for me. 2, 3, and 1. JK, how do you see it?
Well, I have a problem. I don't think you need a new Mercedes. You don't even like to drive on the highway.
But maybe if I had a new Mercedes, I'd conquer that fear, JK.
No, you're a New Yorker. I can't believe people are scared to drive. It's so funny to me. I'll drive. You don't even want to know some things I've done driving. I'll handicap a race. I'll hit a pick 4. I'll lose a pick 4. I'll do whatever it takes on the road while driving.
When he disappears from the show and is locked up for a few weeks, you're going to understand why people. I'm good driving around the city. I love driving around Saratoga. I don't know. Highway drive, the monotony and the speed of highway driving do provoke a weird little phobia in me. Thanks for bringing it up.
Look, I've only been in one driving wreck that was my fault, and I was 15. And I was driving a friend's car, going home, skipping school to watch Jerry Springer, and I rear-ended someone. And
did they let you drive in Texas at 15, or was that part of the story?
No, as well? Not only was I illegal, I was driving my friend's car. But the person that I hit, I knew them because they were skipping school too. They didn't want any beef. I didn't want any beef. We went our separate ways. No harm, no foul, baby.
Was it a good episode of Springer? At least did you get to see some audience fights?
What was that dude's name? Steve? Is that the bald-headed policeman's name?
Oh my God, I don't remember. I've killed that.
I think it was Steve. Speaking of, I'm going to single Irish Declaration in here just because of the class drop. We're talking about $8,000 claimers. This horse won 2 back for maiden 12.5. Which is, I don't want to say it's a better level than this because the horses hadn't won, but I think it's comparable at least. And then they decided to try this horse starter allowance. So they wanted to keep the horse protected. There was something about what happened they liked and didn't go well. The horse wasn't supposed to run well. It's 24-1 that day. Now shows up back here. I am going to single Iris Declaration in the last leg of the Golden Hour pick 4. And then, like we've talked about on some of our other shows, Astronic show as well, singling in the last leg gives you options. If you're alive for $200 because it's been all chalk the rest of the way, then you just ride it out to this horse. If you're alive for 10,000, you can get creative and maybe take some of the other horses that are concerning, like the Due to the Inside I thought were interesting, but I didn't want to spend any money on them. I just wanted to ride with Irish Declaration.
So for your official picks, I'm just going to put you Stone Cold to the 3, or do you want me to list in
Stone Cold.
Stone Cold. I like it. That's a good approach to a bet like this Golden Hour pick 4. JK, we got to move you out of here because we got other guests coming through, but that was great fun catching up with you. Be careful on out there behind the wheel. We don't want anything to happen to you, especially with the news of this new expanded Fox deal. You know, they can't have their star player, one of their star players, end up unavailable. It's like those sports teams that put in the contract, you know, like no trampolining in the off season. They don't want that star relief pitcher to break his ankle. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, speaking of, I do have to get approval for appearance changes in my contract. So if I ever decide to get another tattoo, I guess I got to holler at Tony to make sure it's all right.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
I guess they just don't want me to show up with a green mohawk, but I'll do it.
Maybe they do want you to show up with a green mohawk. Maybe there's some sort of sponsor tie in there. I don't know what it would be. John Deere, maybe. But all right, we will be talking soon, my friend. Great to chat with you today.
See you guys.
In the Money Media, proud to announce we're going to be working with our friends at Woodbine again this year. Just kind of want to give them a shout out at this point. Scheduled opening day just in a few weeks. There's some political machinations going on to ensure that happens, but they're going to get going, hopefully, on the scheduled opening day. And very interesting changes to the stakes calendar this year, with the Queen's Plate being moved back to a Sunday in August. We're going to be following the trail to the Queen's Plate very shortly here. We can already start looking ahead to the futures market on that one. And then the other big news that the Canadian International going to be run on the same day as the Woodbine Mile in September. Start thinking about Toronto in September, assuming everything goes well in the world between now and then, and we've all got our vaccinations. Hopefully this September going to be a great chance to go visit Toronto. Hopefully the film festival will be back on. The racing will be back on. In any case, we're going to be covering Woodbine all season long, and we encourage you to check it out. For more information, go to woodbine.com. Now we are very happy to welcome back to the In the Money airwaves, a voice you hear a lot on the In the Money airwaves, courtesy of the fantastic job she's doing over on the In the Ring Pedigree podcast. You also see her all the time in television, things like the Fox broadcast, and of course, the Gulfstream Park simulcast feed. I'm referring to my friend Acacia Courtney. Acacia, how are you today?
Hey, Pete, I'm doing well. We are recording this on the eve of the Florida Derby, so it's been a very busy week, but it's always a fun one, and obviously looking forward to some great racing this weekend.
Let's dive right in. We're going to talk about this late pick 5. We will do an early pick 5 show as part of our Plus service. That's going to drop tomorrow morning. I've got In the Money Plus editor Tyler Wisman and our writer who covers Gulfstream all the time, John Pinder, lined up for that one. That'll be the first 5 races. Right now, though, we're going to talk about the last 5, starting off with the 10th race. 4:09 is the scheduled post time for the Grade 2 Pan American Stakes, going 1.25 miles on the turf for 4 and up. Acacia, how are we going to get this one started off?
Well, I think the race really revolves around Sadler's Joy. I think he's just become kind of the known entity, if you will, in these kind of marathon races. However, sadly, and I'm such a fan of this horse, his recent starts just have not really had as much punch as maybe you'd like to see. And I think this is something to remember for any of the races that you're playing on Saturday at Gulfstream. We haven't had much rain down here in Florida, so the turf course has been really extra kind to early speed. We've noticed that it's been very difficult for horses to make up ground. And obviously, going the distance of a mile and a half, they're not going to be going as fast. But horses that I think have the ability to be up in that first flight, to me, have an advantage. And unfortunately, that's never been and never will be the likes of Sadler's Joy. I think you must give a look to Cross Border, the New York bred that ran so well in the Pegasus World Cup turf behind Colonel Liam last time. And he has tactical speed, which he didn't really use last time out, but he has it. And I think especially from that inside post, you're going to see that from him. And I'm really interested in Moon Over Miami for Bill Mott, who's had a tremendous meet here. And he said something to me about Moon Over Miami, which I found very intriguing, that he felt that this horse doesn't really handle turns very well. And the slower pace of a marathon race, like a mile and a half, really seemed to help him kind of get around the turns a little bit easier. He's a high energy horse, but they've gotten him to settle a bit more. And he too kind of has some of that tactical speed from the outside, and for a barn that's had a very good meet.
There's two numbers to consider there from Acacia, and I'm completely with her on number one, Cross Border. I think that's a clever case on Moon Over Miami, but Cross Border, the one for me. I'm just looking at pace figures, not crazy at all to think this horse could wire him. If it goes another way, if somebody wants to be super aggressive early, a great stalk and pounce trip could be in the offing. And as you alluded to, the form of that Pegasus turf, I mean, it looked a good race anyway. It came back nicely on the clock. And how much better does it look after we saw Colonel Liam come back and run so well once again? I think that Cross Border is going to take a whole lot of beating in a race where some of the other main competition could be a little bit too far back. But I also like your idea about the 7. I think that can be an underrated factor, what you were saying about Moon Over Miami, with the idea of how horses corner and how they run around turns. It's sort of that next level thinking. It's super useful to get the perspective of horsemen. And that's another thing you deliver on a regular basis on those Gulfstream Park broadcasts. With that, let's move on to race number 11. This is the Cutler Bay for 3-year-olds, scheduled post time of 4:43, going a mile on the turf. I thought it was a tricky race. I wanted to mention a few, starting with number 1, Hyper Focus, who has an angle that I really like. A lot of times I feel like when a horse improves mightily first time on turf, a lot of people, the market, can sometimes look for these horses to regress. Whereas I feel like sometimes it's just a case of they've found what they want to be doing and they can just get better as they continue to run on the new surface. I also like that this horse closed last time in a race that I didn't think had the benefit of a particularly good setup. I obviously respect number 6, Annex. This horse did get a great setup in that weirdly run race with Arzak running off last time. Annex, 2 for 2, major talent, big figure edge. Only knock on Annex is that big figure edge is going to be reflected in the price. I figured I'd mention more as a B type, the 2 fighting force, going out for new connections, but fitting on figures. I thought this horse maybe just moved a little too soon in the Annex race, could be eligible for a better run at what I think could be a very solid price in this spot. But Acacia, you're the one that people are here to hear from. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I agree with you about Annex. I do think that he's been so impressive in his races so far, but he'll be a very short price in here. Now, he's definitely another high energy horse. That's another thing that Bill Mott said. And he said typically they would have waited with a horse like this to run him up in New York because he's already run a couple of times. But he said he's such a high energy horse that it makes sense to just run him again before pointing to some of those more turf races up in New York or even in Kentucky as well. So it makes sense given his ability and his physical. And I love that you mentioned Hyper Focus because he was one that I was going to bring up. My notes from his 2-year-old debut at Gulfstream, actually, I stayed at Gulfstream later last year because New York was closed down thanks to COVID-19. So I did get to see the April and May early 2-year-old races at Gulfstream when there was no Keeneland and there was no New York. So a lot of horses started out there, Hyper Focus being one of them. And my notes from his debut were that I wanted to see him on turf and I didn't really want anybody moving out of that race. So he was a complete toss for me in the Bashford Manor after that. Then when he came back on turf last time, I was so excited to get to see him try it. So I agree with you. I think that he's just found what he wants to do. And I don't think that he needs to be as far back as he was last time out. I think he can be perhaps a little bit more handily ridden from the inside. I rather tease. It's Friday when we're recording this, so it's possible he will break the record even today of the number of meets beats by a jockey in the championship meet at Gulfstream, which is 137. And as of yesterday, he was 2 away. So he's continuing to ride in top form here. So he knows what to do as far as the races. But I wanted to mention a horse that'll likely be a big price and has a lot of speed, and that's King of Dreams. They left him alone on the front end on the turf 2 starts back, and what I think is actually a pretty fine race with the horses behind him. But again, turf at Gulfstream, very kind of early speed. Acacia Courtney seemed to figure that out sooner than a lot of the other jockeys. Put King of Dreams alone on the front end and just ran away from the rest of the field. He's a turf horse, and he's back on the proper surface today.
I wrote your numbers down, 156. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
For excellent. All right, let's move on to race number 12. It's the Grade 2 Gulfstream Park Oaks Mile and a 16th for these 3-year-old fillies. And Acacia, we will keep it with you.
Well, I ended up going to the one Con Lima. I think that she has the opportunity to be the controlling pace in here. And I know that she's been a turf horse recently, but one thing I think is so interesting, and I brought this up on another show I recently did, is that the first start she had with Todd Pletcher was in the PG Johnson, which was off the turf. And you look and say, oh, they were always trying to get her on the grass. She was a main track only in that race. So I find that fascinating that she was a main track only in her first start for Todd Pletcher. So clearly Todd at the beginning thought that she was perhaps more of a dirt horse. And she finished second in that race, but is behind Simply Ravishing, who went on to win a Grade 1. And then they had her on the turf and she was just wiring the field and doing so well. So I find it so fascinating that Todd now switches her back to dirt when you do have a turf fillies race option on the undercard in here, and instead tries the main track. So I think that she could be potentially one that can just run away from the rest of the field, and I think she does have dirt ability.
We see it exactly the same. Dirt, no problem. Looks to be clear on pace figures, and that alone make her an absolutely major contender. What were you thinking in terms of others to potentially come and run with Con Lima in this spot? I had one that I'll mention, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, I think that Crazy Beautiful ran well last time, and she was just on a pure physical in the Devona Dale, the one that I preferred the most. But one thing I thought was interesting was that speaking to Ken McPeak, he said that she actually is probably more of a 1-turn horse versus the 2 turns, but she did run well. She has a race over the surface. I just really wonder if I want anybody really out of that Devona Dale. So that's the biggest kind of hurdle for me. Disappointed by Milfoy. Competitive speed, I think, is still facing some tougher. So for me, when putting the pick 5 together, I'm actually singling Con Lima to kind of help and find some spread elsewhere. But as far as picks, I think you must respect Crazy Beautiful. And I kind of, for me, was dubious about the rest of the field.
I totally hear what you're saying about that Devona Dale, but I'm going to go and include some number 6, Milfoy, anyway. I got really stuck into her last time in an effort to beat Vequist. And there was a spot of trouble, but it was one of those races that's so bad to be believed. I'm hesitant to offer any excuses.
Yeah.
I just figure we got Bill Mott here guiding the ship. I'm taking a wild guess that he's not being pressured to run this filly back here. And the fact that she's in the hands of Bill Mott and has that bullet workout the other day, I'm going to use it on some combinations. If I were to find out that this was, for some reason, an owner picked spot and Mott was just sort of throwing up his hands, I would be away. I would be far away. But under that assumption, I'm going to leave a little bit of number 6 in there. But I totally think that's a smart approach to just single Con Lima, because even the good Milfoy is going to have to deal with this solid loose rival in this spot.
Right. The speed is always the big danger. And I will say, I was a fan of Milfoy heading in from her maiden race into the Demoiselle, and she just completely underwhelmed me before the race in the Devona Dale. And she looked flat. She didn't look maybe as toned as I would have liked. I didn't like what I saw from Vequist either. Like I said, physically Crazy Beautiful was the standout last time. So that could be a case where maybe it's just second time here in Florida. Maybe she wasn't cranked up really last time in the Devona Dale and will be sharper with that big workout.
Now, it won't help folks putting together their pick fives, but this is another reason to make sure to be tuned in to Acacia and her thoughts from the paddock, hopefully on Saturday. I love that idea. You know, it's great to look at horses and get a view in isolation of who looks good and who looks bad. But what's really, really valuable to me is when you see a change in a runner. And that's something Acacia does a fantastic job highlighting in her paddock analyses. Let's move on to race number 13, 555 for the Grade 3 Orchid Stakes, a 1 3/8 on the turf, 4 and up, fillies and mares. This one I really like in here. Has to be ready off the layoff, which is a little bit of a question mark. But number 5, Sorrel, has a lot of appeal. I really like this European form. These are strong numbers on time form, not pace figure. And dialing down deeper into the time form speed figures Sorrel has received. I think this horse looked poised to be competitive in lower group races in Europe this season. So coming to these shores for the Strawbridge homebred, I think Sorrel's very, very interesting item as a potential stranger. Totally respect Always Shopping. Way too obvious to ignore on form and figures. A push button type should get a great trip. I just thought was one who might be bet enough that opens it up to a stranger. The other one I'll mention is number 1, Warlike Goddess. I really like the closing kick this one showed with really no setup off the long layoff last time. Chance to go better here at a price. So I was going to try to get a little bit creative, mixing in the 5 and 1 with the 9. Am I making this too complicated, or am I on the right track?
No, I very much agree with you. We're actually in total agreement on this one too. And that's a big reason why I decided when putting a pick 5 together that I was going to single Con Lima, because it was this race in particular that I wanted to spread. I love Sorrel coming in here. I got a chance to see her up at Payson Park. I was there on Sunday when Greatest Honor and Nova Rags worked for their final workouts before the Florida Derby, and spoke to Christophe Clement about her. And he said, she's not much to look at, but she's very athletic and she's just a beautiful, fluid mover. So he was really excited to have a horse again for Mr. Strawbridge. They have a history together a few years back. And you're absolutely right. And I think that this is something that gets lost with the European form. And this is why kind of researching is so important. Some of those lower level group races would be the equivalent of like a grade 2 over here, and placing in those lower level group races. So the horses that she was running against, I think makes her incredibly competitive in this spot. And she wants to go the distance. So that's no question at all. So she's my top pick as well. Also included Always Shopping. I did underneath use Cristal as well, because I spoke to John Kimmel before her last start, and he said, I've always wanted to try her going longer. And she's been a very tricky filly coming back as a 4-year-old, and she finally put everything together last time out. The 1 7/16 is a distance that we hardly ever run here at Gulfstream. And what had happened was that there had been some rain the day before, and the race, I believe, was originally scheduled for 1 3/8, and they changed the distance to 1 7/16 based on where they could position the gate and where they felt it would be safest to run the race on the turf. So that's the reason for the strange distance of Cristal's last race.
I loved her as a 2-year-old, and that shout is going to make me at least do some backup type including. So for this one, I wrote down on the A line, the 5 and the 9 with the 6 Cristal is more of a B. Does that reflect your opinion?
Yes, I actually was going to go 4 deep in here, including Warlike Goddess as well. So I think this is a race for spreading, in my opinion.
All right, let's move on to the featured event of the day. $750,000 in the pot for the Grade 1 Florida Derby. It's proved such a key race for the Kentucky Derby over the years. The Grade 1 Curlin Florida Derby, I should say. 1 1/8, 640 Eastern. We've been talking about this pick 5. Acacia, how are we going to get paid?
Well, I've been a fan of Greatest Honor all along. I have been waiting to get to see him go the longer distances. The distances of the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby is 1 1/16, which means it's the first finish line. So he doesn't have the full length of the stretch to be able to close. Now with 1 1/8, you're going to have the full length of the stretch. The key, though, with this distance is that the first turn comes up very quickly and where the gate is positioned right outside where the finish line is. So that's going to hurt horses that are drawn more towards the outside with maybe some gate issues or some natural speed like Spielberg. So in that respect is where I'm going to try to beat Spielberg. I am going to use Greatest Honor. I'm very intrigued by Collaborate, who I have been dying to see go 2 turns. It's a tall order, but his last maiden race was huge. And I've liked Soup and Sandwich all along. However, according to social media, he's been kind of the buzz horse. So I may not get a price on him, but he is one that I want to use because I think he's the clear pace setter of the race.
Interesting. I was thinking they might just gun with Collaborate, but that is an interesting point. I mean, Soup and Sandwich's chance in the race would probably be to try to take the bull by the horns as well. I just don't know if he's fast enough to hang with a runner like Collaborate. I'm a huge Greatest Honor fan. On the show, we advised international listeners to take the 25-1 that was available on him for the Kentucky Derby after the Holy Bull. They got some value there because he's in around now. My only fear is, my real fear is just pace and what the goals are with a horse that's already qualified for the Kentucky Derby. You made such a good point that I probably hadn't given enough weight to about that extra 16th to unleash that late run. Win from him would be no surprise. He's going to be all over my pick 5s, but I am going to go with Collaborate on that idea that he might be either able to get loose or assume a perfect stalking position and show a new dimension and pass horses. I just feel like that was a impressive enough debut, finished up well enough. There could be more to come from Collaborate. So I'm going to try to get out of here 9-7 in the Florida Derby this year. Acacia, where can folks find your work this weekend?
You can always check out the Gulfstream Park website, gulfstreampark.com. Under the racing tab, you can find picks and analysis from me and from Ron Nicoletti. Check out the Gulfstream Park simulcast feed. I'll be doing the post-race interview for the NBC coverage on Florida Derby as well. We'll have a lot of coverage of the races throughout the day, but looking forward to what our team has in store. And in a shameless plug on this week's episode of In the Ring with Acacia Courtney, Bob Edwards, co-owner of Collaborate, joined the show and talked a little bit about his pedigree and leading into the Curlin Florida Derby. So if you are a Collaborate fan, hope you check that out too.
Bob is a good guy and a great interview and very passionate with his love for racing and a great example of the type of interview you're bringing week in, week out on In the Ring. Very much look forward to that's in the queue. I'll be listening to that one a little bit later today and look forward to checking out your show every week. You're doing a fantastic job. Really appreciate your time today. We will see you on the TV.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Pete.
Want to remind folks about another exciting development in tournament play this year. The 2021 Lone Star Park Tournament Series. Going to be a lot of NHC seats and cash on the line. No entry fees ever. 100% of the prize pool funded by Lone Star Park. That's pretty cool, folks, and something you want to be paying attention to. I'll tell you about a few events. Saturday, April 24th. That's a day to pay attention to. $1,000 buy-in, live money. And then Memorial Day weekend, a 3-day mega event with 3 different contests. Saturday, May 29th, $500 live buy-in. Sunday, May 30th, $500 event. Again, NHC seats on the line for both those days. And then Monday, May 31st, $2,500 live money buy-in. We've got guaranteed 8 NHC seats with 1 in 10 odds or better, as well as $15,000 in cash with $4,000 to the winner. Later in the season, Saturday, July 10th, another live money contest at the $1,000 level. But this Memorial Day weekend, something to pay attention to, and there's going to be great racing as well. To learn more, check out the Lone Star Park website. For our next segment, very happy to bring in live from Dubai, 8 hours ahead of where we are in Eastern time at this point. Voice you've heard, face you've seen many places, including the Laurel simulcast feed and her own show, Talk Racing to Me, as well as a frequent guest on these shows. Naomi Tucker, how are things in Dubai?
Oh, it's been absolutely wonderful being out here, Pete. I feel so lucky to be one of the few that's going to be able to actually attend the World Cup this year, Dubai World Cup. of course, the fact that we didn't have one last year perhaps makes it even more special. And just being here all week, seeing all these horses on course, especially just looking at which horses are going well over the maiden racetrack, which is, quite a specific track. It's not the sort of very tough, like for example, if you have Gulfstream, which is sort of a bit more of a rock hard track here, they sink into it a little bit more, and some horses love it, some perhaps a little bit less. So I can kind of give you all the lowdown on that.
I want to hear it. And folks looking for much more have to check out this week's edition of Talk Racing to Me, which I've already listened through. You and Chad Summers, who has plenty of experience with success over there in Dubai, going through the entire card and bringing all manner of insights. We're not going to repeat every air, but we'll certainly be covering the Dubai World Cup on this spot. And we'll talk a little bit about this Uae Derby as well. But I want to make sure folks check out that episode of Talk Racing to Me. I assume it's gotten a pretty warm reception. You guys go pretty deep into the card on there.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I've had a lot of good feedback, and actually just finished editing a sort of special extra second episode of Talk Racing to Me this week. I got the chance to sit down with David Egan at the racetrack this morning. So plenty of background noise. We have birds, we have people, but just a wonderful conversation. He's very insightful. And then Joel Rosario came on later in the day. So I've just finished editing all of that, and I'm going to put this out right after we get off air here.
Fantastic. I can't wait to check that out too. Let's start with a general question about the American runners at this year's Dubai World Cup night card. Who do you think the best chance is for the Americans to have some success? I have to say, a lot of years, U.S. horses are leaping out of the past performances for me when it comes to this Dubai World Cup night card. Less so this year.
You're correct there, Pete. It's not as strong as a representation as it's been in the past. And unfortunately, we probably have to attribute that to the Saudi Cup, the fact that a lot of the top US horses appeared there. And instead of then going straight to Dubai, because the horses from the Saudi Cup that went to Dubai had to go the next day. So they've been here in Dubai for 5 weeks, which is, of course, quite a long period for anyone traveling their horse over. So a lot of them went back. The rest kind of remained here. But that also meant that, for example, as we said, Nick's Go, Charlatan didn't appear as they probably normally would if there was no Saudi Cup. They would have gone to the Dubai World Cup. So, and just in general, I think COVID related, everyone's just a little bit more cautious traveling their horses. I dare say it's been going well. I don't believe they've had too many troubles, anything, out of the ordinary. But yes, you're right. It's not like they're standing head and shoulders above the rest, like some of the other years they have been when we had superstars coming over here.
Who do you think the U.S.'s best chance is of getting on the board?
So I have my sort of quick on the top of my head theory is that we should be able to win the Dubai World Cup and we should be able to win the Golden Shaheen. So we have a couple of runners in there. Let me quickly look this up. But on the top of my head, Dubai World Cup, of course, Mystic Guide is your current favorite. Jesus' team comes in with a very strong chance. We have Title Ready in there as well, as I'm quickly making sure that I'm not forgetting an American. Sleepy Eyes Todd, of course, Miguel Angel Silva, sort of globe trotting horse for him, horse of a lifetime that has brought him here to Dubai for the first time, horse that ran in the Saudi Cup. So there's 4 American challengers in the Dubai World Cup that I think certainly have a strong chance if you compare them to the domestic challenge. And then, of course, American dirt sprinters in the Golden Shaheen. Steve Asmussen has got 2 in there, Jaden Journey, as well as Jopan. Of course, we know Jopan as the prior to the Breeders' Cup Sprint unbeaten runner that came in as the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And Joel was very honest about saying he didn't get away well from the gate. He wasn't in a position that he wanted to be in that day, and that he kind of thought we were going to see the old Jopan back again this time around, which I'm very much looking forward to, because I think this is a horse that we've all followed along and we all kind of love. At least I do. I won the Chick Lang at Pimlico, and of course we have Zenden in there as well, who is a massive price, 50-1 morning line for Carlos David. Now this horse has been loving the maiden track. So if anything, I would definitely put a bit each way. So a show bet on Zenden at 50-1 because I think that is just a price that's not justified. I would take him at 15-1, to be honest, in a field that is full of speed. Now, Zenden likes to go to the front as well, but he's drawn to the outside. He can kind of move over, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm not forgetting another American in here because we do have a few. Like I said, Jalen Journey, Joe Pon for Steve Asmussen. Got a strong Japanese continued in that race as well. But I feel like in the Dubai Golden Shaheen, we should be able to do something. And then we have True Valor for Grey Emotion in the Alquoz Sprint. I think he's a very experienced runner as well. So there's a couple of horses that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Let's talk specifically about one other American horse before we dive into a few particulars. And this will give us a chance to do a little bit of general talk about the Shima Classic as well. I know that I wasn't thrilled as somebody who backed Channel Maker the last day that he wasn't ridden a little bit more aggressively. Now, obviously, there is some serious competition in here with the likes of Mogul and also, of course, with Mishrif deciding to appear. A move that surprised me immensely. But do you give Channel Maker a shot, maybe with some more aggressive riding tactics this time around?
Well, he is the type of horse that needs to go to the front. So Joel's just going to let him go forward, let him have his head. That's what he said early on the podcast as well. This is a horse that you're a passenger. You just kind of try and put him in the right position and allow him to do his thing because he's happiest doing that. We see him in the morning with his head up. We're kind of calling him a giraffe sometimes in the morning because his head is so high. Now, is he going to have a shot against some of these European contenders coming in, including, as you said, Mishrif, who just won the richest race on the planet, a horse that has done very well on the turf before, won a Group 2 in Deauville on the turf, won the Prix de Jockey Club Group 1 before that. So clearly a very talented turf runner is stretching out for the first time. And that, to me, the key lies in that. He is stretching out to the mile and a half for the first time. And this is a very fast horse. If you look back at the Saudi Cup, he was sitting very close to front runners Nick Go and Charlatan. And those are true American dirt speed horses. And Mishrif is a sort of your quintessential turf runner. So in my opinion, looking at what he's going to do here, I think if Channel Maker's going to go forward, why wouldn't Mishrif try and pressure him or maybe even take over? I've seen him in the mornings. He tends to lead the John Gosden string of Lord North and New Treasure. He's always the one in front. Now, do with that as you may, but to me, it suggests that this is a dominant horse, a horse that wants to lead the pack. So it wouldn't surprise me if Mishrif, with all his speed and stretching out, all of a sudden is going to pressure Channel Maker. Long story short, do I think Channel Maker has a shot to win in this race? I'm not going to bet on him to win. That's me just being super honest. We have Chronogenesis in here as well. Mogul, just absolute turf specialist. And to me, Channel Maker is an incredibly good American turf horse. And as being European, I'm gonna be biased and say he's not going to win it. No,
sticking with those, it makes sense. I mean, I think you make a great point about Mishrif. Regardless if he challenges him for the early lead, he isn't going to be far back, and he's going to have to deal with that attack for sure. What is being said, and I apologize if I just missed this, Mishrif running for whatever it is, $7 million fewer in this spot rather than the World Cup. What are you hearing about the decision-making process behind Mishrif appearing here as opposed to the far richer race, the Dubai World Cup?
So what I've heard is that the thought process might hinge on the fact that they want to see if they have a possible Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe runner on their hands. Okay. That is their goal with him. So they want to test to see if he does stay that distance and they can move forward preparing for that race instead. But I completely understand because my first reaction was, why don't you go into Dubai World Cup? You're probably going to be favorite there. So, you probably win it, to be quite honest, based on that form. That was phenomenal. But that's not their goal, clearly. And John Gosden, I'm not going to go against his judgment. Clearly, he probably thinks the horse is still a better turf horse. And also he has to take into account what the owners want to do as well. Prince Faisal, Saudi Arabia. So I'm just going to sit here and enjoy probably the best race on the card in the Shima Classic.
It's super exciting. And that's such a good point. And maybe some newer USA racing fans won't realize the place of prominence that the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe has in the consciousness of racing fans around the world. That is the race, like even compared to Breeders' Cup, Kentucky Derby, everything. For a lot of folks around the world, that would be the race. So to be able to get an idea of whether your horse would be a good fit in it, it's not like horse racing. It's not like this horse is owned as a part of like a horse racing business. This is a sporting operation. So maybe the 7 million pales in comparison to the chance to plot the course that they want to for their horse.
I mean, we're talking about Saudi Arabian royalty. I'm sure that they made a decision based on whatever their circumstances are. So you're most likely right.
That they could find that 7 million in the cushions of the couch. So there you go. Let's talk for a minute about the UAE Derby. Obviously, Kentucky Derby points on the line here. Really enjoyed your conversation with Chad about this one over on Talk Racing to me. Just curious if your thoughts have evolved, if you have a suggestion for people wanting to bet from the States on this one, where might you recommend they put their dollars?
So I think this is a wide open and incredibly intriguing race. I'm really excited. This is, of course, 100 points to the winner for the Kentucky Derby. This is basically nearly a winning your in race. Most likely, if you win this, you're going to go.
No doubt.
So I think that whoever's going to win the Uae Derby, we're going to see them line up in the Kentucky Derby, because it seems that the majority of runners in here, their connections, that's exactly where they want to go. We're looking at a very heavy Japanese contingent, as well as the Americans taking their shot at possibly an easier route into the Kentucky Derby. Now, the race itself doesn't have a very strong record. I do believe, I think I looked this up 2 years ago, that the best finisher that won, so the UAE Derby winner, the best finisher in the Kentucky Derby was 8. So that's obviously not very high. But I feel like looking at some of the horses lining up in here, we might have a couple of better quality animals on our hands. So I can't wait. Now, my pick in here is a horse that I've absolutely loved seeing go around on the track, and that's the number 4 France Gulfstream. Now, be careful with reading the past performances for this Dubai World Cup card, because the number of the horse doesn't equal the starting gate. France Gulfstream is jumping from gate 10. So if you download the DRF, it is in the correct order. So you probably just have to write the numbers yourself, and then you can see the saddle cloth number next to them. I think it's based on alphabetical order that they've done it, whereas normally with the handicaps, they do it based on the rating. So the highest rated horse is number 1, vice versa. I think they just did it alphabetically. I'm not entirely sure why. I find it very confusing. So France Gulfstream for Hideyuki Mori, Joel Rosario aboard. So you get an impeccable American dirt rider that has had terrific success at this track. Of course, Joel Rosario won the 2013 Dubai Gold Cup, a 2-time Golden Shaheen winner with Mind Your Biscuit. Now, this horse didn't line up in the Saudi Derby, but he was touted as being the main Japanese hope going into that, but then he had a setback. But I look back at his race last time out at Hanshin, and he sat mid-pack, made this aggressive move on the outside, and cleared away like a professional. That was his 3rd start, and I thought I was looking at a veteran runner. So I just loved what I saw in here. Comes in here fresh, hasn't run since December, but he looks very fit. So I'm trying to go with the number 4 France Gulfstream 6-1 morning line. And then looking at a filly in here, because there's actually 2 fillies in this field, and one of them is the Godolphin runner, the number 14, Soft Whisperer, who's jumping just on the inside of France Gulfstream. And she nearly took them all the way in the Saudi Derby last time out. She's carrying 117 pound versus the 121 that the boys have to carry. And I just thought that was such a gutsy front running effort from this filly. And she won the UAE 1000 Guineas by 7 lengths before that, and basically sort of sat second and kind of cruised up to the lead and then took over. So a very flexible filly that seems very talented. Now, I am a little bit worried, or not worried, but kind of perplexed that Frankie Dettori isn't on her. Pat Gosgrave takes the ride in here, whereas Frankie was on her in that UAE Guinness score. Then I think it was Mike Smith. Yeah, Mike Smith was on her in the Saudi Derby. But Frankie goes with New Treasure for John Gosden. So perhaps I'm wondering where the alliances are here. I mean, John Gosden is a great patron of Frankie, and of course Godolphin is too. Did he have a choice? Was there something going on? I'm afraid I don't have the inside information on this one, but I do know that New Treasure kind of piqued my interest because he's very unexposed on dirt. He's bred and trained previously by Jim Bolger. New Treasure is the number 7, jumping from gate 13. It was bought by the Saudis in Prince Faisal bin Khaled bin Abdulaziz. Gosden's first run with this gelding was in the Saudi Derby. That was his first time on dirt. And he was, in a race full of talent, sat sort of close-ish to the speed. I think it was a couple of lengths back, took plenty of kickback, and still finished third, only beaten by 1 length. So to me, very unexposed on dirt. And he's, I do believe, 20-1. If I bring any glasses trying to see this there.
Yeah, 20-1 on the line. I wanted to ask you about the Saudi racetrack as opposed to the Dubai racetrack, because I'm seeing a lot of horses who either improved or regressed going from one track to another. Now, there was obviously also that weird weather that day.
It rained.
So I'm sure that probably contributed to it. But, how much are you expecting that Saudi form? How willing are you to forgive an off race on it? How willing are you to accept at face value an improvement on it? I mean, I think of a horse like Rebel's Romance. I'm tempted to make a case for Muhib in this spot, but Rebel's Romance has my Muhib on the form book from 2 back, and then there's some part of me that's like, maybe it was the racetrack in Saudi, and maybe Rebel's Romance can bounce back at a huge price. And by the same token, if you think that the effort from New Treasure represents a new level of ability and can improve off that, a New Treasure has to be looked at 20-1.
So, dead honest, this is very tricky because, of course, I wasn't on site in Saudi to see the track myself, but I have made some inquiries with those that were in attendance because a fair few came over to hear. I was told that the Saudi track, beautiful track. Everyone enjoyed it. They thought the horses went over it very, very well. So that's always very encouraging. Was also, by the looks of it, just looking at the replays, a bit more powdery. A bit more loose on the top. But what I did get told is that the kickback on the dirt in Saudi was nothing compared to a normal dirt track kickback. The horses came back much cleaner than on any other dirt track. So that kind of goes against some of the performances I feel, such as New Treasure not minding taking kickback for a turf horse that, of course, turf is very different kickback, much softer. As an exercise rider, I prefer to get hit by turf than dirt. Turf is a lot more loose. Dirt's going to hit you and it hurts. So I am worried that if New Treasure is going to use that same running style and actually get some dirt in his face, he might just go, oh, I'm not liking any of this. So it's tricky. I thought he was interesting. He seems to go over. But if you are talking about horses that, do they go well on the maiden track? That's when I go back again to Soft Whisperer, who ran such a stellar performance 2 starts back in the UAE 1,000 Guineas. And it could indeed make a case for the 2,000 Guineas winner in Rebel's Romance. So it's an interesting, and I feel like the UAE Derby is a wide open race and certainly one worth of using long shots.
I wouldn't get off the new approach idea based on that fear just because you're going to be so compensated in price. You're not talking about a favorite here. So it's a fascinating race. I don't know if you've taken it to this level, but if I held your feet to the fire for selections in the UAE Derby, I think we know your top pick, but what other numbers would you sort of officially list?
So 4 France Go to Ina, 14 Soft Whisper were basically my top ones. I'm taking a stand against Pink Kamehameha. I thought he was going to be shorter. He's only 8-1. So I was like, okay, I guess it's not such a strong stand again. What I thought was maybe going to be the favorite. Panadol, of course, is, I think 9-2 is probably most likely going to be the favorite. He was very strong in the Al Bastakia. But to me, still a little bit green. This will be his 3rd start, late lead change, much the best on talent though. But I'm kind of going to try and beat him with especially the 4 France to Go Ina, who I just think is a much more professional sort. Also, I know how you love your time from Radies. 98 for France Go to Ina, whereas Panadol was 97, and I liked France Go to Ina better. Plus, France Go to Ina in that last start was a 2-year-old. So he's bound to improve maybe a couple of points as a 3-year-old. So I absolutely love him. So I guess I'm going against Panadol. Trying to think of any other that caught my eye. Of course, Muhib was very interesting as well there in that same race. But I don't know. He hasn't caught my eye on the track. It's interesting how, you see horses go by. And that's what I've done because I've had a fair few horses to look at. If they catch my eye, I'm like, okay, who's that? So he hasn't really caught my eye. That doesn't mean he can't run well, but I haven't noticed him as per se.
All right. Sounds like you're pretty into the 4 and the 14 there. We've just got 5 minutes left, Naomi. We got to do a little bit of a deeper dive into this year's Dubai World Cup. You gave a good overview of the USA contingent. There isn't that one dominant USA runner, but it feels like you feel like the hand is strong enough in aggregate that the USA is probably going to get it. But which one? Let's talk about selections in this year's Dubai World Cup.
Oof. So I 100% want the USA continue to get it. And by the numbers, I mean, I think we're doing pretty well with the 4 horses in there. Of course, Mystic Guide favorite, 5-2, comes off the back of a 108 career best buyer in the Grade 3 Razorback. Now, this was interesting because I was speaking to Mike Stidham on the rail. You obviously get the chance to speak to some of the connection. And I was asking him about the fact that the Razorback got pushed back a couple of weeks. And if that posed any problems, did they want to put a prep race in between? Was this where they wanted to go straight away? And he said, no, this was always the plan. Razorback, then go to Dubai. So he said it didn't bother him at all that race got pushed back. So that was good to hear. Now, I am trying to beat Mystic Guide because I feel like that sloppy track moved him up and some of the other horses down. And that was, of course, his first start, and he did so very well. But this isn't a sloppy track. So is he going to back up the same 108 buyer in this track? I'm not so sure. Also, I didn't really like that field that he beat in the Razorback. To me, Owen Dill, maybe, Grade 3 and a Grade 2 horse at best, not that top level class. But the thing is, this Dubai World Cup doesn't have a superstar in here because Mystic Guide would never be the favorite if we have any of our heavyweight US dirt horses in here. Now, the horse that takes my interest is Jesus' Team, because I feel that if there's going to be a pace, he's going to absolutely run up against and most likely at least place, because that's the kind of horse he is. Runs against really tough horses. We're talking Knicks Go, Authentic, Swiss Skydiver, rises to the occasion. It's like he gets pulled upwards by them. The better the horses are he runs against, the better he does. And he's been touting himself very well on this dirt track. Of course, you have Sleepy Eyes Todd, veteran campaigner. I love Miguel Angel Silva's confidence in this horse. He even said that we could go to the lead. Now, I don't think this horse is fast enough in here to do that, but he has won on the lead in the past. Love him as a horse. I don't think he is going to win. So perhaps we start looking at Dallas Stewart, who, of course, has been here twice before, Seeking the Soul, Forever Unbridled. He's got Title Ready in here, who was the Grade 3 Louisiana Derby winner, got a 94 buyer in there. To me, also just a little bit on the soft side. So I ended up looking at some of the domestic horses, and I like to Salute the Soldier. 8-1 is the number 11. Fawzi Nash trains, and of course, the Dutchman rides Adrie de Vries, and he's got very strong tactical speed. He can go straight to lead if he wants to. Not sure they're going to send. I think Capizano might move forward. But if I have to say horses that I like, I'm going to go to 7, Jesus' Team, the 11, Salute the Soldier. Then I'm going to put Mystic Guide underneath because, like I said, I'm trying to beat him. And then I'd say you're going to just end up looking at whatever brilliant prices you can find. I think Hypothetical might be interesting. Miguel Barcelona on board. He does need a bit of pace in there, but his stablemate Capizano is in there to probably give him that pace.
Did you get to interview the Dutch rider in your native tongue?
I didn't. No, I need to. I did see him at the draw, and then as I turned around to then speak to him a little bit before the one we finished, he had snuck out. So don't know where he went.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good ideas for folks looking to wager on this card. I feel like one other point I want to make before I let you go, just for USA listeners. I have one friend who's going to be very mad at me for pointing this out because he urged me to keep it a secret when we noticed it in the betting in Dubai earlier this year. So it's a world pool for win and show. Internationally, each way is win and the equivalent of our show. But in the US, they have a separate pool for place, as in finish 1-2, the USA version of place. And it's a split out B pool, which means it's much smaller and weird stuff can happen. So your ADW probably has a way that you can look at pool totals and or pool percentages. Look at the place pools. And if you want a better idea of what I'm talking about, go back and look at some of the other Dubai Carnival days. You'll see weird instances where a horse plays, I'm just making it up, but 6 to win and 8 to place, or, some other weird outliers. Now it can cut both ways. So you can't just blindly bet your pick to place and think that's going to work out. But if you look at the betting pools and look for those anomalies, that might be a wise guy way to approach this year's Dubai World Cup. And I think your selection, Jesus' Team, might be a perfect one to to make sure you mix in some potential place betting in these USA B pools on. So anyway, there's my little down the rabbit hole wise guy betting idea for the Dubai World Cup. Thank you, Naomi, for going over the form with us. Check out both of her shows, the one about to drop with David Egan and Joel Rosario, and the one earlier this week with Chad Summers. Lots more information there. Will you be, now you're working as part of the notes team, will you be able to send any tweets or anything else people should be looking for from you?
I will try, but I am going to be speaking to all the jockeys straight, or at least a few jockeys straight afterwards, but I'll definitely try on the day. And I just want a quick last thought. This Dubai World Cup, these races are wide open, phenomenal betting opportunities.
It's going to be exciting, and it's going to start early, and we're going to go late into the night on Saturday. We'll get to that in our next segment. For now, we'll bid adieu to you, Naomi Tucker. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
JK and I are both very happy to be working once again with our friends at twinspires.com. We've got the Let Loose podcast, which is back. You can find that. The audio version will be wherever you get your usual In the Money podcast, or you can find it over on the Twinspires YouTube page, and we'll be promoting it on social media as well. There is a video element, which we made good use of this weekend. Also, just want to let folks know about a special promotion. You have to opt into this, but it's for existing Twinspires customers. You have to go to the offers tab, either on twinspires.com or on the Twinspires app, and it is Pick 4 Winsurance from Turfway Park. We talk about the Jeff Ruby Stakes over on Let Loose. And if you play that late Pick 4, you get your money refunded up to $25 on that bet, 25% slash $25. So you bet 100, you get 25 back in cash. Gives you a real chance to get an edge if you're playing that Turfway Park late Pick 4 on Saturday. Just remember to opt in via the TwinSpires app or the offers page at twinspires.com. Very excited now to bring back to discuss this weekend's JRA action. Japanese racing analyst and friend of the show. We've been lucky enough to have on a few times throughout the years. Candice Hare. Candice, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Life is very good. Looking forward to what promises to be one of the longer days of wagering of the year, starting off very early with Dubai, rolling it all the way through Florida, California, and then wrapping up in Japan. Before we dive into the specifics of this Saturday night card and two races in particular on there, I want to just ask you a little bit about what attracts you to Japanese racing. I know a lot of USA racing fans noticed the amount of money being bet in our USA B pools on the first big promoted JRA night. Serious amount of money, 600,000 plus. A lot of folks been interested in learning more and getting into it. What about it do you find appealing?
I think for me, what I find a few things appealing. One is the amount of money that you're starting to see in our pools. As you say, it's really come a long way, and it makes it a really intriguing wagering opportunity with that in mind. Obviously, as you know, the more money in the pools, the better odds you're going to get on your horses. So that's a big positive. But I think for me, what always drew my attention to it was twofold. One was the field size. I mean, the field size is always phenomenal. It's really rare that you see a race there that you don't have at least 10 horses. So for me, as somebody who often likes to find, a long shot when I can, you knew the opportunities were there off the field size alone. But I think the other thing that attracted me, and it's shifted away from that a little bit since when I started watching probably a decade ago, but I was always intrigued by the pace at which the races were run. They really run the races at a tempo. And I think because of that, there's a little bit more of variety, I suppose I would say, in their different race shapes or potential pace scenarios. And that alone makes long shots oftentimes more viable, in my opinion, because the chances of, this obscure pace scenario happening that leads to this 50 to 1 shot winning aren't as short as maybe it would be in a place where race shapes tend to be more predictable.
Makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I know we see that in the horse racing tournament world, that a lot of times, a heavy band of the big long shots come in either as a result of super slowly run races or super quickly run races. And especially those fast run races, very often you can find the best runners in the race. The fastest runners, those with the shortest odds, get compromised. So it makes sense in particular that in those situations, it could open things up. What do you use for data when it comes to handicapping the JRA races? I know there's a number of websites out there. What's your go-to to get information to stay up to speed?
My go-to is a site called Humanity. So it's UMANITY.jp. So it's a Japanese site, but they do have an English, translation. So maybe not all the words are exactly correct, but they have a lot of data when you're talking about, pedigrees and these horses running lines. And so that tends to be where I start. And then if it's a horse who I haven't seen before, what I will do is I'll usually, put the race, put the website back in Japanese, and I'll copy and paste the race name and put it on YouTube. And if you do that, you can find any race from Japan so that you can watch it pretty easily. So it's a little bit of a workaround still at this stage, I suppose, but it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal, at least to me.
I think sometimes having to do that little bit of extra legwork is a way to find an edge. And I think a lot of horse players who are, hardcore enough to be staying up and watching late on a Saturday night, that's not going to be that big of a deal having to cut and paste the race name. I think we'll find plenty of takers when it comes to that stuff. As far as watching the races, I mean, most ADWs have the feeds at this point. We're very happy to be working with Woodbine, the rights holder in North America, to put together these shows. But any advice on where folks can watch and get a chance to play along with these races?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's dependent on, where these people enjoy a wagering. Because like you say, most ADW outlets in North America now do show Japanese racing. If you do watch ever on TVG, usually I have a preview on there, so you maybe can get a little bit of extra help if you go in that direction.
Excellent. We'll definitely look to check you out on there for these races. Let's dive into the specifics, and maybe we'll start off with the race that's awarding Derby points this weekend. It sounded like, speaking with our mutual friend Klaus Ebner, that the more serious 3-year-olds to potentially come over to North America are running in Dubai as opposed to the Japanese Derby prep. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, and that's typically the case. I mean, when you think through some of the more serious Japanese horses on, what's been, I suppose, a short-lived Kentucky Derby through Japan trail, you do tend to see, even ones who've racked up points on this Japanese road, you do tend to see the ones who connections are mentioned as a serious Derby contender. They do tend to go to Dubai, yes.
But in terms of the local prep, who are you looking at? Who are the runners of interest maybe for the race on Saturday night? And maybe if you have any inkling to one or two we might see on the North American shores maybe later in the year.
I think a lot of people are looking to a horse named Ladybug. She's a son or a daughter, of Hoko Teramai, who maybe some people might have remember him if you follow Japanese racing. He was a Japanese dirt star during his career, just a legend of a horse. He raced for a long time and was so consistent. Ladybug wound up finishing third in the Hyacinth, which is also on this Japanese trail. So she does seem to be a little bit of an improving type and does seem to have a scope to improve further in her career, which is very similar to him. Again, he was a late developing type. So the fact that she's shown any sort of ability at 3 years old, I think is really potentially promising for her future. So I know just in general, that's kind of the avenue which most people are looking. And I think that's very fair. She deserves to be favored in this race. One who I would give just a little bit of a glean to if you're looking to bet the event at a slightly larger price would be Gold Hire. Gold Hire is the son of Henny Hughes. Obviously, we know him very well here. There are a lot of Henny Hughes who race on the dirt in Japan in this day and age, and he's done very little wrong. He finished second in his 2 starts as a 2-year-old, and then this year at 3, he's won both of his tries already. One was over 9 furlongs, one was over 9.5 furlongs. So he's a horse who, we're still kind of sussing out how good he is. He's never been against stakes company before, but from what I've seen from him against, maiden and allowance company, company, I've been pretty impressed. And given the pedigree, were he to kind of take some steps forward and really develop into a nice individual, it wouldn't shock me if we saw him come over to America.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And any specific thoughts on betting in the race? One you might, I know they have the late pick 5 with the low takeout, an avenue I know a lot of players are going to be looking at, or any specific ideas on pools you might be approaching with that one?
The one thing I would say when we talk about dirt races in general is in Japan, and it's what I always reiterated when I would cover these races on air with TVG, is I would say, go through the field like you would an American race. I mean, there's nothing different in that regard. But whoever you like, keep in mind where you think they're going to be positioned early. Because in dirt races in Japan, that's critical. I always advise, if you can, find a horse who's either going to be on the lead or who you think is going to be completely out the back. Because the kickback in the races in Japan is so severe. I mean, we're talking about, if you think about yourself on the beach running and then somebody's running right behind you, all that sand from the beach is getting kicked up right in their face. And that's really what they're dealing with in these races. So you tend to either have leaders win because they're not dealing with any kickback, or horses who are out the very back, because when they are making their move, they usually have to come wide and thus aren't getting that kickback either at the most critical time of the race. So that's just what I always advise, really take into account where you think your horse is going to be positioned early, because being stuck in the middle is about the worst place you could be.
Seems like a very valid approach. And again, it absolutely matches my experience and makes sense as to why, between the pace of the races and the kickback, that would be even more the case when it comes to Japanese racing. Let's move on to the featured race of the evening / early morning. Candice, what do we think's gonna happen in what to my untrained eye looked a pretty wide open affair?
Your untrained eye is very correct. I mean, it's definitely a wide open race. I think you look at the Takamatsu no Mayakinen, over 6 furlongs, and for one, this race typically is fairly wide open, at least in the last several years. It's one of these races that you tend to get a mix of horses. You get some horses who've been sprinting all along, and then you get some horses who maybe, especially some of the newly turned 4-year-olds, maybe similar to what we see in America, that they were on the Derby or the Oaks Trail, and for whatever reason, connections are moving them back to sprinting trips now. So you'll see that happen. And you'll see some milers who maybe just are getting a little bit of a later start to the season who start here as well. So you really do get a mix of horses with all different agendas in this race. And I think that lends itself to its wide open nature. Favoritism, as far as that's concerned, I would anticipate it's going to go to Resistencia, who was fantastic last time out. She raced against Group 3 Company in the Hankyu High. Really, really good. And she's looked good all year. If you go on Twitter and you search for Resistencia, you'll be able to find a number of her works since she's come back for the start of 2021. And she's looked sensational in all her works in the morning. And it felt like last out we really saw that reflected in the afternoon. But throughout the course of her career, she's, for the most part, been a model of consistency. The only poor performance she had was in the Mile Championship. That was at the end of last year, but that was her final race of what had been a difficult year. And they tried different tactics with her that they just didn't work out. So it's a very easy race to kind of draw a line through. And, obviously she isn't dealing with Daring Tact here, who she had to deal with on a number of occasions last year. But she's always looked a very, very nice type as Resistencia. And this is the type of race that you would anticipate, potentially could be her first Group 1 win, because there are no, real heavy hitters in here.
Any others we might want to think about putting with her in this spot, or is it as simple as taking the one and betting across and being done with it?
It's a tricky one, because you have a number of horses in this race who are a little more inconsistent, so you really have to demand those odds. But I think if you can get 10-1 or better, I would give a long look to Laudacion, who was third last time out against Group 3 Company. This is a horse who has only been at the Group 1 level a couple of times. This is a 4-year-old as well. Really struggled in the mile championship, much like Resistencia did. But this was a horse who was able to win the NHK Mile Cup back over at Tokyo at the end of 2020. And he actually beat Resistencia in that race. It was over a mile distance. And I find this kind of switch to the sprinting for him this year very, very interesting. The jury is still out if the distance is maybe a touch sharp for him, but we know he has the talent and the ability. You know, he had a couple of nice races against the likes of Salios last year. You know, that's really shown itself to be strong form. And you know, I have a feeling that this year we're going to see the 4-year-olds, whether it's on the male side or the female side, dominate this year. I thought both of those crops really proved themselves to be strong ones last year. I kind of left the jury out for a long time on the filly side for the 3-year-olds, whether or not that crop was really good or whether or not, you know, we were just seeing daring tack dominate a group of bad horses. But I mean, the form stood up time after time after time. So, you know, in general here in the early portion of the season, you know, it's probably going to be a positive to look towards some of these 4-year-olds, because we're really finding that, you know, maybe the older horses weren't quite as strong as we thought they were.
I love that type of handicapping angle / idea anywhere in the world, looking at races by division. And then when the divisions start to merge, trying to figure out the relative quality of them. I feel like you can get an edge sometimes more than just looking at figures and form ratings if you really have a sense of how good a particular group of horses is and when it's maybe one horse dominating that weak group, as opposed to just having a level of form that's going to play well against others. It works regionally too. We've talked about this on shows before in the USA, and as part of our prejudice for Eastern turf form moving west, a trend that may be changing, by the way, this year based on some recent results. But thinking about the world that way, I would imagine, as somebody who is expert on international racing in the way you are, that's something that you've been able to apply time and again. And that's an interesting angle to look at with these JRA races as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important angle, and it's one of those angles that, again, I feel like it's important to kind of be able to get a sense of it very, very quickly. You know, a lot of people, they want to wait until all of these horses are coming into other races and are winning them. And by that point, you've lost your edge, right? Because everybody is seeing exactly what you're seeing. So the thing that I always try to emphasize to people when you're talking about a division, and if form is standing up, you know, if they race each other over and over again and you're getting the same results by similar margins, that's usually a really good sign, right? So if you're seeing horse A beat horse B, beating horse C 3-4 times in a row, you know, as 3-year-olds when they run against each other all the time, that's a great, great sign. And a lot of times people look at that as a negative. They'll say, well, horse A has only beat horse B 5 times. But if that horse is consistently finishing second, you know, that's just showing a real consistency of performance. And that's what you want, especially with young horses.
Yeah, trying to figure out how form as a factor stacks up around the world. I mean, I feel like in the USA, especially in dirt racing with the attritional paces and things, form doesn't always hold up as well as it does in European racing and some racing around the world. And I still think in USA racing, because it's not thought of that much, it's a way you can get an edge, especially on the turf, just keeping track of who beat whom and what that means about what form these runners are in and how they're going to shape up when they move into different groups. Well, I've taken more time than I said I was going to take of yours, Candice, but I enjoyed going off on those tangents, getting your knowledge about these JRA races. Would love to have you back to talk about JRA stuff in the future. We're going to be doing shows all year long on this late week in the Money Show. And hopefully we can bother you to maybe help out in some of our Kentucky Derby coverage as well. I could see you fitting in nicely with another appearance on a Kentucky Derby Monster Pod if we can twist your arm for that as well.
Well, you know, I'm always ready for you guys. So I appreciate being on with you, and I look forward to doing more so in the future.
Very good stuff. Thank you. Want to give another shout out to our friends over at digitalrealestatecoaching.com. There is a lot to be learned from these folks. This could be a side hustle little way for horse players to make extra money along the way. This could be a way to really help your business. Instead of spending thousands of dollars on Google ads, you can learn to generate a flood of new customers without paying. Learn these skills yourself, attract new customers, come up with something else to do to make a little bit of money, and learn about this brave new world of digital real estate. Check out digitalrealestatecoaching.com. That's going to do it for this sort of marathon edition of our Late Week in the Money Players podcast. Lots of people to thank. We'll start with JK. We'll thank Acacia Courtney. We'll thank Naomi Tucker, and we'll thank Candice Hare. We're also going to thank our crack production team. They had a lot of moving parts this week, and they did a fantastic job bringing in people from literally all around the world. Producer Craig Gorbanoff, and rejoining us after a brief absence, producer AJ back in the mix. Great to see his face and have him helping out as well. We'll thank our founding partners. That includes the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. They do fantastic work over there at the TRF, and we encourage folks to give to them and their cause that helps equines and humans. trfinc.org/players. A lot more information over there, and we encourage you to give generously. Also, our friends at 10 Strike Racing, love to root for those purple and black silks as well. Our friends Clay Sanders, Marshall Graham, and the rest of the team over there. Hope to have them back on soon. Most of all, though, I want to thank all of you, the listeners, the viewers, for making these shows so much fun to do. Reach out to us via Twitter or over at inthemoneypodcast.com. For more information on this weekend's racing, check out our plus service, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. That's going to do it. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. Our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Ginchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.